I have not yet given out the telephone number this morning, so if you're so inclined to give us a telephone call, that number to reach us here in the studio, 736-0300, 736-0300. And coming up on 8:34, Bill Colley with you this morning, and we're at 34 with some light rain in some areas, heavier rain in some areas, and maybe a mix in some others this morning if you're hearing my voice through the old-fashioned transmitter system. Hey, I want to tell you folks about my friends who are losing some weight now because they've joined me on the Total Body Transformation System, which promotes healthy weight loss and wellness. And it's not a fad diet. It's not a yo-yo diet. I've been mentioning the last few days. A friend of mine from high school has dropped 9 pounds in just the first week on this diet, and she's checked it out. She's a registered nurse, so she's coming at this from the view of a health professional, and she says there's nothing unhealthy about this diet, and sometimes even the rapid weight loss that is accompanying it. Developed by a 21-year-old company that has an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. I'll get that out one of these days. BBB, as they call it. That's the acronym. BBB. Supported by a scientific team, including researchers from some of the leading universities in the United States. And I've been telling you as well that the Total Body Transformation System has a couple of patents. One is for reducing waist circumference, and the other for increasing metabolic rate and weight control. The system is proven to burn 6 times more fat and lose 8 times more weight than normal results from diet and exercise. And meal replacements are often healthier than what you've already been eating. You can still have healthy calories all day, and the cost, well, when you compare it to what you'd be spending on the groceries that you're not eating a couple of times a day, it's pretty much the same. The average participant is going to lose 22 pounds and lose 4 inches off a waist in just 60 days. And we wanted to point out, too, as well, that it helps increase your metabolic rate and burns fat then faster through a natural burst of energy that you're not going to get in most diets. And it's backed up with an unconditional full money back guarantee. A marketing executive, Don Chandler, who lost 50 pounds on the diet, that's how he discovered it. And now he's become, I'll call it a proselytizer for this diet because of the success that he had. He's available if you'd like to know more by giving him a call at 208-731-3560. Don is right here in Twin Falls. Telephone number 731-3560. 8:36 now on Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310, KLIX and News Radio 1310.com. Couple of quick notes about the weather, if I could. I happened to see this, a couple of stories this morning from directly out of Idaho, but Ada County. Now, look, I have to admit, driving in winter is certainly not as easy as driving in summer. Last Saturday, I was driving to the pet store to pick up some pet supplies, and I cut down North Fillmore Street behind Costco. And if you know, it's kind of a curvy road, and because of the big pine trees, it's very shaded, so the ice there may not melt as quickly as it melts at other places. I wasn't even driving at 20 miles per hour. I was 15 maybe. And I'm driving down the road and I came around the corner and I hit an icy patch. And I did a 180. I mean, I was shocked. I took my foot right off the gas as soon as it started. And I came to a stop sideways in the turning lane. And no one else was around. Luckily, no one else was around. So I got it straightened out. But I tell you what, that sobers you up fast. Well, not in a literal sense, but you get what I'm talking about. It's the middle of the day anyway. It wasn't like I was, on a bender. So I straightened the thing out and I went back to the pet store, got to the pet store, and then back home, driving back home, I was a little bit more careful. And yet we've been dealing, winter officially started a month ago. Check this story out today from the Idaho Statesman. This is the headline. 64 crashes in Ada County during the first few hours of winter storm. I don't care how many deputies, troopers, and local police officers you have on duty, how many fire rescue people you have on duty, how many EMTs and other responders you have on duty. They can't keep up with that. That figure, it's snowing, folks, and it snows in Idaho sometimes in winter. I know it was slick and it was messy, but that's generally what snow is. And then you start to ask yourself, I had a little lapse the other day and understand that, but 64 people in a matter of a few hours in one county? Is anybody there actually giving much? Well, they're probably thinking, I've been driving now for a few weeks in this, so okay, I'm better. I can speed up now and I don't have to be so cautious. But there's simply no way that you can have people responding unless you're calling in every last person to work to have them meeting the need for the response yesterday was incredible. There were emails in my inbox this morning from state police just saying, hey, people, if you can do it, stay off the roads, which is not always bad advice in this type of situation. We were talking earlier about how the state may be faced with a $220 million shortfall when Obamacare goes bye-bye. Well, the state had a $138 million surplus supposedly going into the next fiscal year. So if you lose the Obamacare payment and you don't come up with an alternative, and then if you turn around and you pay all of this overtime for people who are out plowing roads and sanding roads and responding to accidents along the roads, and I read yesterday where there's been a special appropriation for the transportation department because, well, the surface of the moon has been transplanted to the interstate between Boise and Nampa, and there are so many dang potholes out there. You could probably build a house in one of them, and they're big, and unfortunately, this is going to eat into any so-called. Isn't this how it works? When you think you've just gotten ahead in life, there's always some sort of setback. 20 minutes now away from 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. The other big story of the morning was a new study out, which is backing all the other studies about people flocking to Idaho because of scenery and low taxes. I just was reading a story this morning. Some people were wondering how much damage could Barack Obama and his White House do before they left office in these waning weeks. Well, as it has turned out, they can do a lot of damage, and he still has a little over 24 more hours to go before he gets the boot. And I wanted to mention a couple of things that caught my attention this morning while looking at the AP wire. Some of those are local and regional in aspect, and then share a couple of thoughts on that with you. It's about energy policy and the last minute use of your tax dollars by this fellow. I did want to mention as well, though, during this segment, my friends at Waddell and Reed, who've been investing money for folks in this community, going back decades, and they'd like to remind people, the firm was opened in 1937. That's a long time in this day and age. You think about how many businesses come and go, even successful ones, over about a period of 80 years. One of the oldest firms in the country to offer mutual funds. And they own and manage two of those fund families. They invest by a conservative nature. Waddell and Reed, obviously after 80 years, they must know what they're doing. And Waddell and Reed is taking a more of a planning approach when it comes to your needs, and what they try to do is look at every piece of the puzzle, all the aspects of your life. They help build proper expectations and build plans around clients' needs and goals. Waddell and Reed will help you manage your money, and Waddell and Reed takes planning personally. I wanted to point out today that, well, I'm just looking at the Trump is leaving New York City at the moment. They're awaiting his departure. He was, what did he say? He was writing his own inaugural address. So he must have some input, I would assume, but he was writing his own address at what he called the Winter White House, which means Mar-a-Lago in Florida. 844, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. And we're at 33. This story caught my attention. It's just a quick paragraph. It's one of the shorter stories on the Associated Press wire this morning out of Ogden, Dateline Ogden, Utah. State leaders have announced plans to add electric vehicle charging stations along 1,500 miles of highway running through Utah, Wyoming, and Idaho. The leaders joined Utah's Rocky Mountain Power on Wednesday in announcing that the utility received a $4 million grant. Now, that's not a loan, that's a grant from the U.S. Department of Energy for the new initiative. Now, if they're giving $4 million in a grant, that's your money, by the way, for a 1,500-mile stretch here in the Mountain West, then they're likely giving away a lot of this money as well in California and in Oregon, Washington, and in Nebraska and Oklahoma and Texas and, the Dakotas and, probably in Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, New Hampshire, Vermont. I'm telling you, this money is going out everywhere. It's only $4 million, and that's a drop in the bucket. Well, when you do these projects year-round on a weekly basis and across 50 states and then the territories, It does add up after a while, right? So you're wondering, well, if there was really a need for these things, wouldn't people build them on their own if you allowed them to do that? Well, I bring this up because a couple of things I saw this morning. The incoming Secretary of the Department of Energy in Washington, which is a superfluous organization in the first place, Rick Perry had said 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, I guess, when he was in a debate, it was one of the three departments. Remember, he couldn't remember them all. He was mocked by media for that mercilessly, but Rick Perry was suffering from bad back pain at the time. And, it can be a distraction. But one of those was the Department of Energy. And it's my hope that Rick Perry is going to Washington essentially to wind down the mission of this department and save some money. And the writer says, as former energy secretaries in Republican and Democratic White Houses, we can say with complete confidence, and by the way, it's Spencer Abraham and Bill Richardson from New Mexico, that Donald Trump, they believe, and this is two guys, one a Republican, one a Democrat, has made an excellent choice in selecting Rick Perry to be the Secretary of Energy. And they go on to talk about how Rick Perry developed an energy strategy in Texas, which is, I was reading yesterday, the Permian Basin in Texas may have more oil beneath it than the Bakken Shale does in North Dakota. And the Bakken Shale at one time was, it's an astronomical amount of oil in the Bakken, but now you throw in the Permian Basin in Texas, and it is just staggering the amount of oil that may be there. But Perry decided to go ahead and allow people to develop alternative energies as well. However, the government of Texas, when Rick Perry was there for 12 years, was not giving away your tax dollars to do this. It just simply, it deregulated and helped and assisted companies that wanted on their own to build solar and wind projects. It got out of their way. It gave them some easements, of course, but we did that with the railroads. That's how we opened up the West, and this country developed and industrialized so quickly and became the mighty economic powerhouse that it was from the 1860s through the 1960s. So Rick Perry did all of these things, and he did it without collecting your money and turning around and handing it to some political favorite, which is what the federal government has been doing over the last 8 years. We have a caller with us. Telephone number to reach our show, 736-0300, 736-0300. Also, my email address, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. It's 848-35 right now, and caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. Happy or Merry Christmas to everybody with the snow. Anyway, what you're saying is right. The liberals, if they would just get out of the way, stand back, shut up, keep their mouth shut, and let people that know what they're doing do their jobs, like Perry, the engineers that do this, we would have so damn much oil. Gas wouldn't be costing us probably much over $1. But, you remember back when they had that big leak down in the Gulf of Mexico. Oh, it was the oil company's fault and this and that. It wasn't. It was a damn liberal. See, if they would let us drill on land, we wouldn't have to go to the Gulf of Mexico. We wouldn't have to go to the North Atlantic, North Pacific. We could do it right on land. They could have had that leak, and if it had been in southern Idaho, had it sealed up in a couple hours.
Yeah.
But no, they got to keep their freaking mouths going. They can't shut up. This global warming thing's a hoax out here, and that's what I call it, a hoax. I don't believe it. I cannot believe that the human being can cause the climate to change like they're saying. But anyway, pardon me?
Well, no, go ahead.
No, well, and I was just going to say, we got a new president coming in tomorrow, thank God, in my mind. But people, we need to get behind him. See, this is the problem with our country. People are going to whine and cry because they didn't get their way. I cannot stand Obama. He is a disgusting little creature as far as I'm concerned. Has nothing to do with his race, has nothing to do with anything except his politics. And I never said a word, I whined a little bit, but I never protested. He was the president. I just pray to God that, by golly, Trump will get in there and do what he says. If he doesn't, I'll be the first one to vote him out.
Well said, and I thank you much for the telephone call. Tomorrow is a great day, no matter how you look at it in this country, because this is really an opportunity for a new start. It's day one. Now, we don't know what's fully going to happen. You can't predict the future. But I'm just saying that the global warming issue, climate change, they later called it because they couldn't justify all the pauses and some of the cold weather you get So they called it climate change, and then they excused it as being, well, you're going to get extremes. That was flip the page with a big book of excuses when that happened. Climate has been changing for 12,000 years. We had an ice age. We came out of it. It's been getting warmer ever since. Climate goes back and forth like that. There's nothing out of the ordinary about this. The fact of the matter is, we're actually a little late going back into an ice age. I'm not upset about that. If global warming has been preventing that, even if man has contributed to that, I'll tell you what, an ice age would be far worse for all of us. You think the weather's bad today. Can you imagine trying to drive to work through a 20-foot glacier or 200-foot glacier? And it wouldn't take long for these things to build up. We have another caller with us. It's 8:51. We've got 33, and you're on KLIX. Hello.
Hello, yes. I just wanted to comment on the president and his executive orders. I don't know why there hasn't been a bill introduced that once elections have taken place in November, no executive orders to happen. That would save us a lot of this last minute, cramming in things that are not right for the American public.
Well said. And to add to that, too, and I thank you, Michael Perutka from the Institute for the Constitution. I get his daily emails. I actually went to hear him give a presentation at the firehouse back in my hometown back east, and 250 people showed up for it. That was pretty impressive in a small town. He says that executive orders should only, and George Washington introduced the first, or did the first. But Washington wasn't saying, all right, I'm going to bypass Congress. Washington simply said, I want my staff to go out and buy more printer ink. That's an executive order. It deals with his department, which is the executive branch. This whole notion that we've developed in this country, simply Congress has to do its job and stand up and say, no, these are not valid. Yes, the president can instruct his staff to do various things in his own department, the executive branch. Washington said buy printer ink. No problem. Go out and buy it, right? But this notion that President Obama can rule by fiat, the only reason that has been allowed to happen is because people in Congress haven't stood up and said no, and that's simply all they have to do. Or the states simply all we have to do. And this timidness I don't know why it happens. You take them to court, and you'll take them to court on each and every one of these things, and they did take him to court on a few, and the court said, no, this isn't going to work. And they scotched his attempts to do a runaround the Congress. 736-0300, 736-0300. Bill Colley with you on Top Story this morning. News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. I've got 35 coming up on 8:54. You're up next, and you're on the air.
Something that's bugged me since before Obama is, why do we give the UN any power? According to the Constitution, I think it's anyways, I don't remember what it is. It requires 2/3 of our representatives to approve any international treaty, and that's exactly what you're dealing with when you're dealing with the UN. It's an international treaty. So why is it that the president can make any decision outside of that?
Well, the UN and then the Iran deal, anything like that, don't have any.
Our representatives need to grow some balls. That's what it boils down to. They need to step up and do their job. And if they don't, we need to call them out on it.
Thank you. I guess they've all joined Chelsea Manning in the nut house. No, that was not a pun. I'm sorry. 8:55. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Kelton Hatch joining us just after the news at 9 o'clock this morning from Idaho Fish and Game. We've got a lot to talk about with Kelton, and obviously some of it is somewhat tragic if you're a if you're a pronghorn sheep, it's very tragic. That's on the way in a few minutes on the program. So if you have a question or comment for Kelton, hold on to that. He'll be along in a few minutes. Quick note on this Energy Department situation with Rick Perry coming in. Washington Examiner editorial. It says, of course, that the DOE, Department of Energy, had a proposed budget of $32.5 billion, is responsible for a number of energy-related tasks, although regulating fossil fuel industries isn't one of them. Those belong to the EPA and the Department of the Interior, which is, I guess, why Ryan Zinke was getting some nasty questions about this and global warming the other day. One important function has been to deal with nuclear issues, including nuclear power, missile complexes, and nuclear waste and cleanup. The agency is also tasked with developing a national energy plan. And then the writer goes on and says he needs to eliminate all mandates and subsidies for energy resources, no more cylinders, scale back and rationalize energy research, expedite approval of liquefied natural gas terminals, and end the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. That's the recommendation from that particular conservative paper. Got time for one more call before the end of this hour. Maybe I can squeeze in two, but I'll try one. You're up next. You're on the air on Top Story. All right, as I said, I can try to squeeze in two. 736-0300. 736-0300. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. My email address, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com. And you're on the air.
Yeah, quickly, up in Greenland, and if people don't understand the difference between Greenland and Iceland, Greenland was called Greenland so people would come there, even though it was more icy than Iceland. And they had record 121 below zero. And in Siberia, there is 61 below zero. And in fact, the other day, up in just north of here in Kerry, they had 39 below zero. Some of this stuff, this kind of, thing is quite serious, actually, because, there is no such thing as global warming. There is cyclical events, but if there truly is evidence of a mini ice age, this kind of thing will affect the way we feed the world for however long it lasts. I'll hang up. Thanks.
Hey, thank you much for the telephone call. There's a Greenland story that a friend of mine, he does something similar to what Chris Anderson does at the Herod Center. My friend manages a science museum in Kentucky. And he explained to me years ago, remember when they excavated that old plane? It was a World War II plane. The crew had to make an emergency landing in Greenland. And when they went to find it, it was buried beneath 245 feet of ice and snow, despite the fact people were saying the glaciers had melted in Greenland. Then how did this plane end up buried the length of a football field beneath all of this? My friend at the time was invited to speak at the United Nations as a contrarian to global warming, and the science museum he was working for at the time said, "Oh, wait a minute, we've got to have you work on some renovation issues." In other words, we don't approve of what you're doing. Shortly after that, he left that museum and went to Kentucky, where people obviously aren't so brain dead as they are along the East Coast. Kelton Hatch joining us in a short while here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Idaho Fish and Game, a lot to talk about there, and more of your phone calls as well, coming up in hour number 2 of Top Story just after Fox News at 9 o'clock.